So the goal of today's lesson is to introduce you to some of the things you need to know when you're working in a spreadsheet program. And we're specifically going to work in Google Sheets, but a lot of the same things apply in Excel. Sometimes the buttons are just in a different place. But we're going to approach it, instead of approaching it from here's how you do this one thing in the spreadsheet, we're going to approach it from here's kind of how you'd work your way through some data that you would get from a government agency for a story. And as we go along, you're going to see the different skills you need to learn in the spreadsheet. So we're not going to spend a ton of time practicing those skills today, but we're going to apply them, and I'll give you the introduction, and then it'll be your job to spend more time solidifying those skills. Kind of like a foreign language, you need to put some practice into them. So hopefully the goal here is to help you see why you would need these things, and instead of me just showing you here's how to do something. I can teach you how to push the buttons all day, and unless you understand the context that you would be needing those things for, it's really hard to move forward beyond knowing how to do a pivot table, for example. So we're going to start with a pretend story idea here that you have been tasked with writing about people killed in fires in your city, probably like a house fire or some other kind of building fire, right? And the fire, and this how a lot of reporters start that story would be to call the state agency that keeps track of fire deaths and ask for data that looks something like this, like how many people have died each year. And a lot of journalists, including editors, see this as data. Okay, we have data, we're good. Now we have a data story. That's not how this works. So this is actually information that has been summarized and gleaned from data. So it's information. And it went through an interpreter, really. Someone went into the actual data and interpreted this into this summary fashion. And so they tallied up how many people died each year. So there's a lot of opacity here, or a lack of transparency, I guess is the better way to put it. We don't know anything about those 63 people who died in 2017, for example. We don't know where in the state of Minnesota. We don't know when. We don't know anything about the people. We don't know anything about the circumstances. There's a lot of questions there that are left unanswered. If you're in a time crunch and it's a breaking news situation, hey, this is better than nothing. I would rather have you get this rather than go out, writing a story that a whole lot of people died in fires last year. We don't want to do that, right? So, but let's think about, that lack of knowledge here in this data. This is a source that is limited in what knowledge it can tell us. So, what if we wanted to do something more encompassing? What if we wanted to know more about the people? What if our story, let's say this is a situation where a fire has just happened in your community and 3 children died. Well, maybe you want to know how many of these deaths over these years were children versus how many were adults. We can't see that here. The reason I got this data was that we seem to have had a run of fires during a winter. I think it was the 2017-18 winter, actually. And it just seemed like we had a big spike in deaths just during those winter months. Well, so what we're looking at here is the entire calendar year. So we don't know which ones of those occurred in the winter versus some other season. So we need more detailed data we need to ask the agency for more detailed data. So how do you do that? It's kind of like finding a human source. Who has the breadth of knowledge, and what is that breadth of knowledge? So the the main place to start is to ask probably the state agency, when you collect data from the various fire departments around the state, what pieces of information are they required to tell you, and what ends up kind of in your database? And that would be, a good understanding of what you could get. So I'm going to flip over to the sheet called main data, and you'll see what we did get from them. I honestly don't think this is everything that they had, but this is better than what you just saw. So now we know on a specific date the name of the person who died, their age, whether there was a smoke detector present, whether that smoke detector was working or not, and whether there was a sprinkler and if that was operating or not. So it's getting us a lot more information that we want. So when you get something like this, your first job is to kind of get to know the data. Like I like to say, take it out for coffee. So a first thing would be to look at those columns. Let's see, as we just did, going through what do we have here. And then sometimes even just scrolling and kind of getting a sense of what you see in your data. Then the other thing we can do is we can do some sorting and filtering to kind of get to know the data. So sorting in sheets is a little more complex than it needs to be. And here's one way where I don't like sheets compared to Excel, but it is what it is. So to sort in sheets, you have to follow this process in order to ensure that it's going to sort properly. So the first thing to do is put your cursor somewhere inside this block of data, ideally on a column that is well filled in. So for example, the smoke detector one is not well filled in. Maybe avoid that. So I'm going to go over here to the name and just drop my cursor somewhere. And then you need to highlight the entire chunk of data. So the simplest way to do that is, if you're on a Windows machine, it would be Control A. If you're on a Mac, it would be Command A. And it should highlight the whole chunk of data. And I'll scroll down so you can see that it goes all the way to the bottom. And we go up. And once it's highlighted, then you can go to the Data menu and go to Sort Range. I know this makes no sense. Sort range, advanced range sorting options. And I'm having you skip past these like little shortcuts here because those are not going to help you be certain you're doing what you need to do. So advanced range sorting options. Okay, so sorry for the bubbles here. So first thing we need to say is my data does have a header row. Yes, unfortunately Sheets does usually not default to that. It doesn't guess properly. So my data does have a header row. And once you do that, then this little sort by box fills in with your labels from your header row. So we could see which column we want to sort by. So let's just start by sorting by the new date. And we'll go Z to A, which would be the most recent to the going back in time, so that we can see how current this data is. So we can say sort. So we do have some March of 2018 records. This, as I said, we got this data during the winter of 17-18, and so there's the ones that occurred that winter. Okay, so let's try sorting one more time. So Control A or Command A on a Mac. Go to the Data menu, Sort Range, Advanced Range Sorting Options. This time let's sort, data has a header row. This time let's sort by the age of the person. This is a good way to kind of get a sense of if you have any outliers. So say sort. So we do have some babies, and this would be a question I would have, is like, were these truly 1-year-olds, or is it possible they were infants who were under the age of 1? Like, how do they categorize infants? This is a good example of, you don't want to make any assumptions in this data. You want to make sure you understand. It does seem kind of odd that it starts at 1, because we do know that infants do die in fires. So how would an infant be handled? That'd be something. So put your common sense hat on when you're looking at data and just see if it makes sense to where you are. And then I'm going to, well, we could sort it again, or we could scroll down and we could sort it again. I'm going to sort it again. Sort range, advanced range sorting options. This time I'm going to go Z to A, and we do have some 98-year-olds. I did this because sometimes I have seen data come in where something like an age or some other number in the data set is like astronomically high, like, 5 million. And there's just no way that that number could be 5 million, for example. So this kind of sorting helps you find any weird outliers that may be errors in your data, and also just helps you understand the scope of your data. So, the other thing we could do would be to sort by that date again, but go A to Z. Now we see that our data starts in February of 2005 and ends in March of 2018. So kind of makes me wonder if we're missing January of 2005, or if there were no fires in January of 2005. So it's something we need to keep in mind if we're going to do winters. We're missing the December of like November, December of 2004, which would be the 04-05 winter. Keep that in mind, right? So this sorting process allows us to kind of see what we have. The other thing that you can do to see what you have is turning on what are called filters. So again, have your cursor somewhere in your data set, go to the data menu and choose create a filter. So this is going to turn on some little pull down menus at the top of each of your columns. Looks like a little pyramid. And when you click on each one, you'll see that there's options. So let's go to, we'll go to smoke detector present. And when you'll see that there's lots of sorting and filtering options here. You can sort using this as well. This is an option. And then you could filter by condition, which would be things like, is the value here empty, or is the greater than or less than date, dates before or after, that kind of thing, text contains. The other thing you can do is at the bottom you can see the values, one unique value that exists in the column. So we know that all the values in this column are either empty or a blank, the word no, unknown, or yes. Those are the only options here. If we go look at last name, for example, you can see how different that is, right? There's, maybe there's two people named, we can see here there's two people named Braun. Where's Braun? But it only shows up in this list one time. So it's one instance of each thing in that column. So, so for example, we go back to smoke detector and we say, I only want to see the ones where there was no smoke detector. So I can clear all of these, and then I can select the no by just clicking on it and say OK. And now you'll notice over on the left that we've jumped from 1 to 4 to 7. So the records that do not say no in the smoke detector column are here. They're just hiding behind there. So and now it's indicating that you have a filter turned on. So and these these letters and numbers have turned green. So it's an indicator that you have a filter. So we can see how many said no, they did not have a smoke detector. Now this is another case where we have a lot of blanks and we have a lot of unknowns. Look at how many. I mean, this is a lot. So this raises some concerns about the quality of the data. Can we really say how many people died in a fire because there was no smoke detector? I'd be cautious here because there are so many unknowns and blanks. That's just a lot. It makes that idea of was there a smoke detector or not shaky. So that's something you want to look for. So I'm going to turn select all back on to be able to get the filters back on. Okay. So let's try another one. Under age, you can do that filter by condition where you can say age is less than, and then we'll write in this box here, we'll say 18. Okay, so here's all the children who died in fires. Not too many, but we can see them. We can clear this filter by changing this less than to none and say okay. Now the other thing you could do, especially if you have a big data set, complicated, lots of columns, you could pick just one person here. I'll pick this one and get down to just one record so you can kind of get a sense for what is here. What do we know about this one person who died? You know, we know the date they died, we know their name, their age, and this information about the smoke detector nut. Think of all the things we're missing right now. We don't know where in the state of Minnesota, time of day, we don't know any circumstances about the fire. So it limits what we can do. But if you did have a more complicated data set, this is going down to one record is a good way to try to understand what the data can tell you, because you could just sit here and think about what is it saying about this one. And you know, in this case it's one person. In another case it might be a school or an event or a car accident or whatever your data is about, right? But try to understand that one and make sure that you have a full understanding of what the various columns mean and how they were used by the government agency so that you're not making any assumptions. You don't want to make any assumptions whatsoever. Okay, so I'm going to turn these filters off. We can, select all here to get everything back, or you can go back up to data and just say remove filter altogether. So that's kind of the kind of getting to know you phase. And that, of course, will take a little longer if your data set is more complex.